Ha. So this is a new machine. So Windows has this habit of hiding file extensions, yes, which we do not want. We want to see all the horrible things that are on the file system. So okay, good. Okay. So in the past, what I did is always launch the shell, the MSS shell, over command, over the Windows and R, Windows and Run hotkey. So we will do this. Yep. Okay. Let's see. That seems fine. Oh, hello. So I'm currently updating MSys, which is kind of the layer between Linux, well, the POSIX interface, and all the tools that GHC needs to build itself and whatnot. Which isn't all too exciting, but also leaves room for questions. So I'm also recording this, and my hope is to just upload it, and also my plan is to essentially update the wiki as I go. So the hopeful outcome at the end is that there are instructions that work on the wiki, on the GHC wiki. Also, good luck with your lecture. I guess you're in the USA then, since it's 10 p.m. where I am. Or maybe Australian, I'm not sure. The last Haskell stream I did, I think, got like 5 Australian viewers. Since it was, I think, my morning, so it must have been their evening there. So, okay. Let's see. Oh my god, that's a lot of dependencies. Oh, Jose! Man, we should talk again at some point. But I'm not trying to guilt trip you. But I miss our calls. Oh, it's nice to see you still online and around. Since I'm recording this, Jose was a wonderful mentor when I did Google Summer of Code, and we pretty much have kept in touch since. I think it was 2 years ago, right? More than 2 years, 2.5 years ago by now. Are you planning on doing Summer of Code at some point again as a mentor? I think I never asked you how you ended up being my mentor. How did that come to be? Because like the topic I was working on code layout in the native code generator, and I'm pretty sure that's not something Jose ever worked on before. Did you just see, oh, that sounds interesting, and said, oh, I might try to mentor that student? Well, it was fun, wasn't it? I wonder what the delay is between me saying something, you responding, and me seeing it in the chat. It must be like 10 seconds. So I'm not sure if there's any. So we have 3 viewers now. So if any of these are students, I can highly recommend doing Summer of Code. It pretty much led to the events that eventually led to my current job being my current job, which is working on GHC. Maybe you can get Jose as mentor again. I've heard he's pretty good at it. So when does your lecture start? How long do we have your company for? I guess maybe 15 minutes or something. Oh, so since it's a stream and I don't want you to just watch bars go by. So the GHC wiki has this list here, preparation windows, and I followed the first step which is installing MSys. And I've done all of this before, so I've set up the system GHC Dev environment a few times on Windows, but the last time was over a year ago, and I used a script back then that tends to bitrot, and the wiki shouldn't depend on external scripts and external tools that are more likely to be broken. So I'm just following the wiki with the direct approach. And I see. And the first step is installing MSys, which is kind of like a POSIX Unix-like environment on Windows, where you get the version of GCC that's a native Windows executable, and GDB and CUT and AVK and all those tools, Python, and so on and on. And well, after we already did this, so we are currently installing dependencies. And since the internet is a mess, downloading all those takes quite a while. So it's only 140 megabyte to download, but the servers seem pretty slow. I'm not sure if we could set mirrors or something like that. So Jose, if you have anything that you think might be interesting to talk about in such a stream, you can just you can pose questions and I can throw out some answers or something. Might make it more entertaining while we wait for this to move along. There's lots of timeouts, which even the wiki says is kind of to be expected, and we should just restart it, but still surprising. And while you come up with questions, I will see what Sebastian updated on the wiki. Ah, nice. Oh. So it seems Sebastian already updated the wiki. Sebastian Graf is also a contributor to GHC. He works currently mostly on one optimization and things to make it happen, which is nested constructed product result. There's a paper about it and it's too complex for the actual topic of this stream. But it seems he had to install Windows recently and updated the wiki. So hopefully we can just follow the instructions and it works. Well, that's I did consider Windows subsystem for Linux. So there's up and downsides to it. So some things are just not supported as far as I know. Like there have been a few iterations. There has been the Windows subsystem for Linux 1, which I think was just broken with GHC because of the way it allocates memory. Then there has been the version 2, which as I understand it, is more like running it in a VM. The issue there is that you actually produce Linux executables that then have some compatibility layer or a virtual machine in between and get run on the Windows kernel in the end still. So one of the main reasons why I use Windows is, well, one reason is I already use Windows for unrelated reasons, right? So it's not far, but I could just dual boot or something like that. But since I have the ability to just simply use Windows, I think it's good to have a GHC developer that actually uses Windows. Because there's, I don't know, I'm sure there's over 10 bugs that have broken GHC or Cabal in some way that I ended up fixing or I ended up reporting and they got fixed. And probably at some point someone else would have reported them or fixed them. But it's just good to, keep Windows functional, and that's easier if a GHC Dev uses Windows. So that's the main reason why I choose Windows directly. And the same thing essentially I think applies to the Windows subsystem for Linux. So if you develop an application and want to run it on a server or something like that, Windows subsystem for Linux, Linux subsystem for Windows, it's fine, right? You can just pretend it's Linux and hopefully that just works. Maybe you hit a bug or something. I haven't really tried it yet, but others have tried it successfully and there have been bugs initially, but I think currently it just works essentially. But it just isn't any good if you want to actually have a Windows executable at the end. So if you're a Windows user and you want the end result to be a Windows application, then you should use the native Windows setup. And if you want the final result to be a Linux application, then use the subsystem for Windows. Yeah. For GHC Dev work, I guess I could get away with it. Like most of my work is actually operating system agnostic. But there have been Windows annoyances, and I think we made a lot of improvements. So when I started with GHC, there were a number of subtle bugs and issues with Windows. That has been like 4 or 5 years ago, the first time I used GHC. And it got better since then, and then it got worse, and now it's better again. So I think the upcoming release, GHC 9, is hopefully a big step forward for Windows users of GHC. No promises in the end, but I hope so. And yeah, there were all I never expected that, but it turns out Windows changes actually do break software, and GHC was one of those victims. Like there were subtle changes to some APIs that broke GHC 8.3, I think, pretty terribly. Yeah. I know why they always put you in the moderator position. You ask good questions, Jose. I have to close this window. So let's see how far along this is. Oh, yes. Okay. This seems to have been fully installed. This step is not necessary if you used method B of step 1. Okay, what's method B of step 1? Via stack, okay. Okay. So I'm not sure if this... Can you just run it like this in a shell? I don't think that works. Does it? I think you need Oh, I always figured you needed the export keyword as well. I guess you actually don't. You never learn. Okay. Someone explain to me what the difference is between something like this and export witness is 64. I'm not sure. Yeah, well, with Windows 10 you are kind of forced, I think, to update. But yeah, I know Richard Eisenberg, for example, never updates. He uses a Mac, but he recently mentioned that he basically never updates his operating system unless he knows something breaks. And I think Windows, with the huge user base and whatnot, is more susceptible to, hacking badness. So that's why it makes sense for Windows users to be more dutiful in their upgrades. And yeah, Windows is pretty annoying about forcing you to do that as well. So what I don't actually want is to install this GHC into MingV64. So I'm just gonna install this under opt instead. Has that always been recommended? Or is that that seems like a Sebastian thing? No, it was always like that. Okay, interesting. Oh no, let's see. So how big is 8.2? Maybe I should have bootstrapped. So I kind of think the same way as about updating operating systems, about updating the bootstrap compiler. So we have two viewers. I'm not sure if everyone, I know Jose is, but if everyone is familiar with that. So you need GHC to compile GHC. And GHC, the code base, is always backwards compatible with 3 versions back. So you can compile, and so for example, GHC 8.10, the source code will be compilable with 8.8 and 8.6. And I'm usually very hesitant to upgrade those for its work, and it doesn't really buy you much. But sometimes also things just break, and it's not Windows specific, so I don't always have to be the first one to find those bugs. Thanks, Jose. Well, if this goes badly, I might still be doing this when you get back, so just check back in after. We will see. Have a good lecture. Oh wow, 5 viewers. So, let's see. I do not like this. So the wiki recommends installing this directly into Mingway. So the wiki recommends it in a way where it will end up like /bin/GHC has the executable and /doc has the other things. But I actually prefer it when it's in like 8.10 GHC. So let's see. I don't think there was nothing in here. We created this folder. So this is a new MSys setup, so opt is empty currently. So I'm just gonna make a directory GHC 8.10.2 and then I'm gonna move, that should work, right? Yeah, that's of course doesn't work, but that's enough, that's good, that still works. So we've installed the GHC. So do we have it, a Cabal already now? No. Huh. There's actually no instructions for installing Cabal, I think. Oh, right, there is. Let's check if those paths seem like sane. Okay. What does curl-big L do? It's probably here. Yes. So okay. Okay, what's the dash L flag? Okay. Well, that's not really all that interesting. Let's see. I of course forgot to specify the extension. So, do we have unzip installed already? No. There's so many tools that you forget you had installed when you have a new setup. So let's see if this works. Yes, very good. Does this also work? Huh. GHC doesn't even have that. Yes, excellent. Right. So we have the basic necessities. We have Cabal and GHC installed, which most definitely are required to build GHC eventually. Boom, boom. It's so annoying that with Cabal 3.2 you have to pass the install method. It didn't support symlinks on Windows, so there really was only one valid option anyway, but it still forces you to specify it. Like the newer Cabal doesn't have that issue, but yeah, that's quite annoying. Do we already have Git installed? If the text is too small or anything, let me know in the chat, please. I'm trying to make the shells a bit bigger to make it more stream friendly, but like I want to see some amount of their contents. Boom, boom, boom. So I'm perfectly content to install this. Does the prefix do in Cabal? Okay. Okay. So it's the prefix. Okay, yeah. I'm fine with installing Cabal and Alex to the global path, so to say. I have to find the window again. Oh right, it's actually doesn't require that anymore. So user lookup. So we want this to be so. Okay. They have already been installed. Alright, we did this up here already. Well, I guess now I have two versions. So now is the big moment, right? So I'm not sure how other GHC developers are doing this. What I usually is I have one tree where I have my version of master, so to say, which is like once every week or every second week I go ahead and bump all my commits if I need to, even if I don't need to. But like it doesn't make sense to base all your patches on a different commit because it makes comparing things hard. So basically I always have one commit that is my current upstream version of GHC that I work against, and then I upgrade that or pull on that branch from time to time. But it just makes it easier if I have a patch that's some small optimization, right? I don't necessarily want to build GHC 2 times, once without the patch and once with the patch, just to compare it, if I can avoid it by just building it once and already having a version to compare it against that isn't modified. Okay, so let's make this a little bit wider. It's sadly not the most interesting thing to set up GHC, but so far it seems to just work, which is great. So one thing that always has been tricky is setting up symlinks. But we will get to that with, actually we can, I guess, already. Alright. So Windows now has proper symlink support, but the semantics, as far as I know, are a bit different than Linux. Similar enough to make it work usually, but for sometimes they still can cause problems. But the big issue is they are disabled by default. So, and nofib, I'm not sure if this is good or bad, but it is what it is. Currently the nofib benchmark suite, which is customarily used to benchmark GHC performance, uses symlink now in the Git repository. So you have to make sure, if you're using Windows, to have a system set up where symlinks are supported. So, okay. Alright, I can't install Visual Studio Code already. Code. So Visual Studio Code is my editor of choice. Let's go with the stable build. So on my last machine I had both the stable and the experimental branch. System installer 62. Do we want the system, or I'm fine with the user installer? Okay, so let's check if this is good. What was it again? Damn it. Let's see. Okay, that was the name. So on Windows we so we installed MSys, but GHC, if you download GHC on Windows as a user that just wants to write some simple Haskell code, GHC actually comes with a version of MSys. Because GHC uses GCC and the GNU linker and things like that for some things. And the setup instructions that don't actually download those versions we ship with, but the configure step will do this. Part of the reason is I think Windows even has like its own like GHC currently, I think we even use our own patch set of these. So Tamar, nickname is Fix, has a patch set that works around, let's say it like that, around some issues with long path names on Windows and GCC. Yeah. it's all very complicated. So, oh no, it's still request. It shouldn't recommend make. This shouldn't recommend make. So, I guess this is more aimed at building a GHC from source to install it, but still, I think we should switch this over to Hadrian. So. Okay. So there are some issues with the Windows terminal, or like cmd.exe that msys runs in, and terminal colors and command codes, and it's all horribly complicated and broken. But what was the issue? If I think it used to be that if I ran Hadrian without this terminal wrapper, which is called WinPTI, then if I sent Ctrl+C, it would terminate Hadrian, but it wouldn't terminate its subprocesses for some reason, so it would keep running for a while. Maybe I should just see if that's fixed. I do not remember why I started using this, so maybe it's not necessary anymore. So let's just build a quick GHC, right? We will place the build artifacts in the performance folder. So, this is the time where let's see. I don't think going past 16 threads will do it much good, even if you have the cores. So, I do not need colored output. Boom, boom, boom. I only have one screen, but so if you're wondering why I'm keep opening OBS in the stream, that's why. So if you want to check the chat, I have to actually look at the OBS window on my one screen. My other screen broke a while ago and I somehow didn't miss it that much. Like recently I have had some kind of work like debugging via second screen would have been very helpful. But depending on what I actually work on, I often make do with just splitting the editor into two panels. So, why did I download this twice? I don't know. So, yeah, sure. Yes, yes. So one issue that we have now is that if I run, for example, PowerShell, let's run PowerShell, right? This will just say, oh, not recognized, because we only installed GHC in the msys environment, which doesn't share the same path very well. So there's this. At some point, Windows, thank God, improved this GUI for environment variables, So I can just change, for example, my user path variable here and add a new entry and point it to the GHC that we just installed. So that would be this path. So I think if I just start a new shell, then it should, yes, work. You have to restart the shell because the environment is loaded when the shell starts, even for PowerShell, so that doesn't get updated. So the other way around would be you could just install a GHC using stack or GHC up or something like that, and then add that to the MSys path variable. So the reason why I had to add it, but it's not in the guide to the path variable, is because I didn't install it to use a local bin. Because I like to easily swap out the GHC version, right? So like I might have a bug where GHC bootstrapping fails on Windows if the bootstrap compiler is GHC 8.8.3, and then I don't want to have a global GHC where the files are all in user local bin and it's not so clear which version that actually will be. So let's see. This is so sad. So I bought a new Ryzen. You can see it here. It's the new Ryzen 9, the top of the line one with 16 cores. And I set the thread count to 16 for Hadrian, because if I decide to build another version of GHC or so in 5 minutes maybe, then I want to avoid overloading the CPU, also streaming and whatnot. So 16 is good enough. But it's rare that the CPU usage goes above, what's that, 1, 2, I think that's 10% each line. So it usually is like around 20 to 30%. When if it would parallelize perfectly, it should be at 50%. So there's not a huge amount of parallelism in GHC in the code base for compiling it. Perhaps expected, and hard to avoid. If you have a file that, I don't know, defines the type of a label in the code that we emit, for example, that file is gonna be imported by all code that needs to generate labels and so on. There's lots of those things. So it is faster. The one thing we can do is we can temporarily disable the real-time protection. Don't do this at home. Because maybe I should try this again, but even when I added the GHC folder to the exceptions for the files that should check, the real-time protection still added a lot of overhead to writing files and reading files. And since MSys is a kind of emulator of the Unix API, some things will open a file more than once and things like that, which does play really, really badly with the Windows antivirus. Yeah. Yeah, it's 8% currently, so 50% would be 16 cores, so it's like 2 threads, 3 threads, that are 3 parallel GHC invocations, I think. There's some bottlenecks there, but it does seem faster than, well, it is faster by a lot than my old machine, but still. I really dislike this warning, but it comes from the text code base, and the reason is, I think, because well, actually that should be fixable there. Anyway, it's not a huge issue, but we try to keep GHC fairly free of compiler warnings when compiling it. So in the GHC code base itself, that's actually enforced. In the C part of the GHC code base, it's not enforced, but still. And in some of the utility things like a headoc, for example, here. But, oh yeah, that goes up now. So it's interesting that the CPU usage actually goes up to 100, because I explicitly told it 16 threads, right? I guess there's the streaming overhead, and also hyper-threading. But yeah, weird. Did I say 6? Oh. I'm just gonna interrupt. Oh yeah, that was the bug. So I hit Ctrl+C, right? I didn't use WinPTI here. And Hadrian will continue building the RTS. I think the ways where it works is because Hadrian invokes a subprocess that invokes, I think, Cabal maybe. So anyway, this will continue building for, I think, till the end. So yeah, I used G16. Interesting that shows up or goes up to 100%. So I said the parallelism isn't high, right? But now it's up to 100%. What's up with that is the RTS is mostly written in C, and there we have a lot of parallelism. Oh, that's, I think, is a fairly new function. I will have to ask someone if they were the one to add this. Maybe it's fine to not inline those. I fixed the number of these kinds of errors, so GCC, if you're not very insistent via C attributes, will just say at some point, I'm not inlining this no matter what you say. Well, not no matter what, but even if you say just inline foo, I won't inline foo because that's too large. Which is, I think, often reasonable. So the question is then here, are these important to be inlined or not? So we will, let's see. Let's just look at the code, right? So we had traverse heap. Okay, that's a bit louder. Traverse. Okay. So this static inline pragma essentially defines down by the reprocessor to, I think, just inline, either extern or inline, if I remember right. And it's perhaps a bit overused, so I think there's a lot of function where it's just by default people started marking things as static inline, because especially as Haskell developer, you are used to this kind of idea that inlining is always good for performance. Haskell, the runtime system performance is important, so it should just inline anything. But here I'm not sure if there's that much benefit. So there's this case on the function info table. And I don't think this will ever be static. Oh, interesting. So how are those? This should just be the same function. I mean, the C compiler should be able to figure that out, but because the only thing that's different is here this variable is called pap for partial application, and here it's called for application. But the heap, the layout of the heap object is the same, so it gets traversed using the same function. Well, a problem for another day. But yeah, I don't see what could get specialized here much. The number of arguments, no, probably also not. They're also dynamic, right? So that comes out of here, and C comes out of what C that gets written by traverse pop, so traverse pop probably doesn't get inlined either, specialized. No, that's not gonna benefit from specialization, so we should just not use static inline here. Let's see how far the build got in the meantime. So GHC builds itself in two stages. So GHC doesn't have a stable ABI, what it's called, stable application binary interface. What does that mean? It means if I have GHC version A and you have GHC version B, you can't build a library, ship it to me, and I can use it with my GHC compiler unless our GHC versions are the same. So this brings a bit of a problem with itself, which is we want to build GHC, which is itself a Haskell program that depends on libraries like base. So somehow we have to build base using a version of GHC that doesn't exist yet. So we can't use the GHC compiler we already have, because the compiler we are gonna build is gonna have different expectations of that base library. So we build one version of GHC that will then build those libraries, and then with those libraries and that GHC we will build another version of GHC that then uses those libraries. It's complicated. I'm sure there's an entry on the wiki page about that. Well, so far this was surprisingly painless. I'm still somehow expecting this to fall over any moment. want to reveal my password management here, so yeah, but I think at this point I'm pretty much ready to, you know, clone my branches on this new machine, rebase them to current master, and fix some bugs, add some improvements, and what have you. High damage total. Well, I hope it's more than 20 actually. I think it's set to output FPS, which is I think 30. But yeah, so the cam seems to work now. Even when the system is quite under load. So should be no problem tomorrow. Don't make me blush here. Well, I think the setup is complete and there's not much point to wait till this is completely done, so I think I will end this stream. And maybe I will see you in Discord, right? Damaged OSS. Bye.